16th, 2022. If everybody please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our agenda this evening is as follows. This was posted on the town website and the town board. Number 1, Leon site plan amendment. Applicant seeks an amendment to an existing site plan to add a proposed drive-through coffee shop on an existing commercial site located at 660 Hoosick Road. David Leon, applicant, and there's a public hearing to commence at 7 p.m. Number 2, Whitbeck, minor subdivision. Applicant seeks minor subdivision approval to create 4 new lots containing 4.02 acres, 3.20 acres, 6.77 acres, and 31.69 acres on property located on 131 Krieger Lane. Richard Whitbeck and Jacqueline Whitbeck are the applicants. Number 3, Atlas Renewables special use permit and site plan. Applicant seeks to construct a commercial solar collector facility on property located off Oakwood Avenue and Farrell Road. Atlas Renewables LLC is the applicant. Number 4 is basically a discussion from around the planning board concerning the proposed Brunswick zoning law amendments. And under new business, we have Olson Development. And this is a site plan review for the medical office building proposed at 112 McChesney Avenue. So with that being said, first on our agenda obviously is going to be a public hearing for the Leon site plan amendment. The procedure for the public hearing is as follows. The purpose of the public hearing is to hear concerns, comments, and views from the general public regarding a particular proposal or application. All public hearings are electronically recorded and the written record of the proceedings is generated. In most cases, this written record is included with the minutes of the planning board regular meeting, which is usually conducted immediately after the public hearing. The applicant will be required to respond to all concerns and comments met at the public hearing. And subsequently, the planning board will consider all concerns and comments when evaluating the application to ensure that the applicant has addressed all the issues in question. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. The notice of public hearing will be read by the planning board attorney. Next, the applicant will give a brief presentation on the proposal and will provide any updates on the application. Upon completion of the applicant's remarks, the chairman of the planning board will recognize persons from the public, and these individuals will be allowed to speak or offer their comments, concerns, and views. Since the proceedings of the public hearing are electronically recorded, it is requested that all speakers step forward and use a microphone at the podium. All speakers will give their name and address for the record. Okay, the notice of public hearing will now be read by the planning board attorney and Bill Preston.
Notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the planning board of the town of Brunswick at 7 p.m. on Thursday, June 16, 2022 at the Brunswick Town Hall, 336 Town Office Road, Brunswick, New York, 12180, to review an application to amend the site plan submitted by David Leon to add a proposed drive-through coffee shop on an existing commercial site located at 660 Hoosick Road. Copies of the application and supporting documents are available at the Brunswick Town Hall and are available for public inspection during regular business hours. All interested persons will be heard at the public hearing. This was published in the Eastwood Press, placed on the town signboard, posted on the town website, and mailed to owners of all properties located within 300 feet of the project site.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'll have the applicant come up and give a brief presentation to the audience, please. and offer any updates on the application.
Thank you. Paul Litton, MJ Engineering, here to represent the applicant. As the chairman mentioned, we're here for a site plan amendment. We have a handful of proposed revisions to the site plan that occurred since the approval. Number one is the Wendy's site. The Wendy's operations have changed since the approval. They're building inside, reconfigured a little bit by about 80 square feet. Also, there was a dual drive-through lane, a drive-through and a bypass. They no longer utilize the bypass lane. It's just going to be a single drive-through only to go around the building. Secondly, Always Building. The original approved site plan had a cart corral, as it's shown here, on the west side, and also had a cart corral here on the north side. They no longer use two locations for their carts, so we were able to eliminate the cart corral here and added 3 additional parking spots in its place. Coming down here behind Planet Fitness, during construction, there's an existing utility pole here with 2 guy wires. The original plan was to relocate that pole and the guy wires. However, by relocating that pole, it was kind of a small effect. We have to move several poles in the south direction and several poles in the north, moving them into our footprint of the building. So what we're proposing is keeping the pole there with the guide wires and just reducing the width in the back, angling the parking. So it's one way now coming into parking here instead of being perpendicular. Coming down further here between Planet Fitness and KFC, the property owner acquired a small rectangular parcel in the back in which we are expanding parking for another 23 parking spots to accommodate, mostly for the Planet Fitness gym. It could be utilized by KFC as well, but I'm anticipating the majority of it due to the high turnover of this Planet Fitness. They needed some additional spots within that piece of property. The biggest change is in this center island here. A coffee shop is being proposed for drive-through only, 1,300 square feet. Drive-through window and a pedestrian walk-up window. On the south side here, people walking would be able to come up to the window, place an order for their drink, and move on. Cars would come in through here, order window on the east end, pickup window on the north end, with circulation going counterclockwise in and out. Those are the proposed changes to the site plan since it was approved back in 2021. Is there any questions that the public may have?
Okay, thank you. At this time, I will open up the floor to anyone who wishes to come up and make any comments or have any concerns or views that they would like to express. Ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Jessica Leese. I'm an attorney with National Grid. I'm in-house counsel in their U.S. Siting Department with offices at 2 Hanson Place in Brooklyn, New York. So the board may be aware, but we do have property to the rear of the subject property, which houses the substation. Our property is located at 259 Hillcrest Avenue. So we have been recently working with the applicant and their engineer, and we have no objection to the proposed use, or specifically no objections to the modification of the site plan. But we do just have some outstanding questions and concerns with the erosion control measures that are currently being modified on the site. So we did submit a letter to this board recently in May, and the initial plan had approved a retaining wall in the rear of the property, and it was subsequently removed and other erosion control measures were put in place. Both the retaining wall would have required coming onto National Grid property, and ultimately work ended up being done on our property. So basically, we also did not receive, we received legal notice, but due to it not being funneled to the right person, we didn't receive effective notice until April of this year, when we did a site inspection, and we noticed that trees along the rear of the property line had been removed. There was grading on the slope, and our property is at a lower slope, lower grade, and it resulted in erosion and sediment coming down to our property, and damage to a drainage swale and perforated under drain. So after we submitted this letter, a representative from our real estate department was in touch with the applicant and their engineers. They did apologize for the damage. They didn't realize there was work being done. And we have since been in touch and working on a revised erosion control plan. They gave us a draft at the end of May. We are still waiting details on the reinforced slope. And as of Tuesday, we did have our internal engineer review and had some questions which we did email to the applicant and their engineer. So that's the process right now. We expect that they will respond to our questions and work with our engineers. But I just wanted to bring these facts to the board's attention. And I would ask that specifically because there is work and grading that comes onto our property, and there is a live substation on the property for everyone's safety, and that the board either put in some sort of condition or make it a condition prior to any issuance of a certificate of occupancy, or condition of this approval, that the ultimate grading plan be something that it's reviewed and signed off by National Grid, especially to the extent that it does interfere with our property.
Okay. Are you going to stay here for when we open our public meeting? And first on the agenda is going to be National Grid. I'd like you to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to, Jim?
Yeah, Jim Tatchik, 387 Brunswick Road. I've been to most of the public hearings about this, the coffee shop there. And I've been into the Chuck's office a couple times, and I still don't know what's going on there. For example, there's gross inconsistencies between the floor plan that's on file in the office and the what I call like the proposed possible exterior of the building. Okay. For example, on the floor plan, at least the one I saw in Chuck's office, which is the latest file, there's no walk-up window there. I'm not sure what that's going to be. And then I don't know. This whole thing, started. It was approved 2 years ago or so, and then all of a sudden, the owner of the property decides it's not getting enough revenue and decides to just jam another business in here. And I'm not sure when it's going to stop. We might do it again. I'm not sure. But going back to the building, some of the deficiencies of the building is obvious for like the car traffic, vehicle traffic going in when this making a left-hand turn in there. You'd have to make a 140-degree turn to get into that. And I don't think most there are a lot of vehicles that can't do it. And then once you get in here, if you order the window there, I took out my tape. This may not be accurate. You may have an accurate number here. I get a radius of 7 feet on that curve. And there's no way you're going to, 1, 2, here, 7 feet, you're gonna turn an SUV or even any kind of car, you're not gonna make that turn. To get from one window right here, because you can't swing out. You're gonna have to go down, and you're gonna have to be tight to the building when you come in the order window, tight to the building pickup window, and there's no way you can make that turn. Okay. Let alone, for example, a snowplow going through there, a big snowplow, you know, not a city snowplow, but one that would go, be plowing over there, you know, with like a big salt, dumper on the back, spreader on the back. I don't think that they'd be able to fit through there. And I'm not sure if the poor employees are gonna have to go out there with shovels. So obviously, you're not gonna have, the larger vehicles going through there. And then also comparison of the computer-generated conceptual rendition of this and the floor plan there. I don't know if you look closely at this, but if you look at it doesn't have a little picture there. We have on the side of the building where the walk-up window is, at the end of which I guess is maybe going to be there, that's going to be the walk-up window. There's a big window picture right here at the other end. And if you look at the floor plan, that's the toilet. So you have a big window looking into the toilet. Now, one of these is wrong, I know, but I think there just wasn't any thought put into either one of these. And I think without that, how can you approve something if you don't have a floor plan or an exterior plan of the building? Yeah. And I think also there's a big problem with pedestrian traffic around here, because that's going to have a road. There's going to be a block of pedestrians to get, for example, this is Aldi's. Aldi's is a well-known budget supermarket. They're going to be a lot of people coming there on the bus. The bus is over in Hillcrest. They're going to walk down here. Normally, you just walk and make it diagonal, which they're still going to try to do, but they're going to be blocked by this new business here. And then the traffic, the auto traffic, the additional generated trips. Let's see now. I think it was in the study in Chuck's office. It was 40 per hour. In the minutes, it was given as 20 per hour. Look at the last month, the last time this appeared. Okay. I'm not sure which one's right, but anyways, the Aroma Joe's is not in a vacuum. Okay? If you got that 40 trips is added to all the other trips in the businesses in this development. Planet Fitness, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Wendy's, Aldi's. I think we have to get some sort of idea of what the total number of trips in and out of this project is. All the businesses, not just Aroma Joe's. Okay? And I think the limiting factor, obviously, is going to be how well that traffic light can control egress from all the businesses, in addition to the cut-through traffic from the neighborhoods. So I think you need some sort of a cumulative study here. Now, I hate to dump it all on here, on Mr. Lippman here, but they came in 2 years afterwards looking for this. Right? They could have done this at the beginning. I think this is something that it should definitely be done. And then the other, I guess I see it on here. Is this like the formal green space of the project here? What's
that's
shaded
not
green?
changed, yeah.
Okay, right. And then the other thing I was looking at when you came for the additions and changes, there were charging stations on that request. Have those been placed here? Electrical charging stations?
They're
for cars.
looking into putting some EV stations in, yep.
And where were those, do you have any idea where those would be?
They're favoring along Huzik. He's looking at possibly putting them here. He's still in negotiations with the manufacturer on where they are going. But yeah, he was interested in putting some EV
Okay.
plugins there.
I think I tried to get, the only business here that's amenable to charging stations are places where people are gonna be there for a fair amount of time. Typically, currently, chargers you're talking about on the order of hour or so at minimum. People aren't gonna be, obviously you're not gonna put it at Roman Joe's, right? And then, the fitness center is the only place where that would be, would meet that criteria. And I think you ought to put them close to the fitness center, otherwise they're not gonna be very useful. If you put them out over on, Huzik, it's too far away from anybody to use them. And then just generally, I know when you look at a two-dimensional map like this, you can't really get an idea of what the thing is gonna look like. But I go to Planet Fitness a couple of times a week, and you see the rising of the grand KFC blocked building, right? Nice red and white stripes, okay? And then you see, oh boy, that's about 60 feet from Planet Fitness. And it just feels so tight there, okay? The Roman Joe's is gonna be about 50 feet from Planet Fitness. And then the distance between a Roman Joe's and Aldi's, that's gonna be another 60 feet. So this is not gonna be a very attractive project. You know, this is gonna be essentially wall-to-wall asphalt. And if you avoid another, what I call a bunker or blockhouse building in the middle of that, I'd like to avoid that.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else wish to make any comments? No one else? Once again, I'll ask, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come up, express any views, concerns, or comments on the amendment to the site plan of the Leon project? Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion for the board to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Are there any correspondence through the building department?
There was no written or email.
Do we need to, for the record, the letter that was received from National Grid? Should that be?
We should note that, yeah.
Okay. We received that.
Did we hear that?
I have it, hold on a second. So I can't seem to locate it right now. You have the date on that?
Looking at the email.
Okay. I thought I had the letter with me. I do have the letter, okay, it's,
Have the date of the letter?
it's May 23rd.
Yeah.
I did.
May 23rd. Well, we also, in regards to this, received a county response. Should that be also?
We'll note that when we get into the substantive discussion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've heard discussion. Is there any further discussion on the motion to close the public hearing? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now we will open up our regular meeting. First on our agenda, before we get into the Leon project, is to review the minutes of our last meeting on June
June 2.
June 2. Now, there was reference at the public hearing that there was an incorrect, was it on this minutes, as far as trips? I don't think it was on this minutes. I think it was on the prior minutes. Because Leon was not on our agenda for June 2nd. We might should probably go back and take a glance at the previous minutes.
Well, we can, I'm thinking, given the numbers, it's more of a clarification. It's probably 40 individual in and out movements and a total of 20 round trips.
Yeah, we did provide, just to go over a couple of those things.
Well, we'll get there. We got
Okay.
to
Oh,
So we still got to approve these minutes. Okay, is there any corrections or amendments to these? Okay, then I'll make a motion that they be accepted as they've been presented.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And now we're officially into our agenda, for the Leon project. So you're up. Before we get into that, we did receive a notification, zoning review action from the county. Basically said that the Bureau of Economic Development and Planning has determined that the proposal does not have any major impact on the county plans, and that approval consideration shall prevail. And this was a notice to include the drive-through coffee retail. The applicant proposes adding a drive-through coffee retail to the gym, supermarket, to fast food restaurants. If you don't have a copy of that, we'll get you a copy.
I'm not-
We've had the public hearing, there's been some comments, there was some, obviously, before we get into the comments on National Grid, the other comments,
Yeah, and I apologize, I didn't bring everything that was presented at the meeting, 2 meetings ago, where we did provide a architectural rendering that did show the pickup window on the side of the building. Also, we did provide a pickup truck turning template movement through here. That was a part of the last submission to show that a pickup truck can maneuver in and around the whole area there. The sidewalk connection from this point to this point is basically the same as it was previously. That is still connecting from the main drive going into Aldi's. We did include an additional crosswalk here to be able to get to the pickup window for the proposed coffee shop. But this sidewalk remains connecting point from A to B as previously. For the traffic generation, we did provide a cumulative amended report to show not just Roman Joe's, but we included the previous traffic study numbers for all of them to show that adding the Roman Joe's does not increase or does not require any additional mitigation. The traffic signal there. All of the trips that would be going into Roman Joe's would be most likely passerby trips that they're already on the road, so there really isn't an impact to Kuzik, just internally to the site itself. I think that covers his comments. Also, for the representative of National Grid, Yes, Mr. Leon. We are working with them. They did submit in email comments. I think I got them earlier this week. We'll be getting them out tomorrow on the grading plan in the back to remove the retaining wall and to just have a reinforced slope in those locations. We are in the process of working with them, and we will continue to do so. I just want to make sure that that isn't part of this application, but if a condition to continue with communications with National Grid to rectify this problem, we wouldn't have any issue with that. It is ongoing, and we are working with them.
I would probably suggest we would require a written comments to be respond to, the comments at the public hearing to be in response from you, some type of written form. If you could include that statement regarding National Grid, and you're working with them as part of a comment that we did receive at public hearing.
Sure.
I think that would suffice. Andy, am I correct on that?
Yeah, it should be addressed on the record. Certainly, there was public comment period.
Since we do have a representative from National Grid here, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here. Is there anything that should be addressed right now that was not addressed with the comments?
No, we're working with, my main contact is, her name is Pamela at National Grid. We've been working with her. She's the one who provided the email with a handful of questions. So we will be responding back to them tomorrow to keep that communication and that process going.
Okay.
That was the 14th, right?
I think it was just a couple days ago. Yeah.
This was the last list of questions.
Okay.
Yeah, one is looking for some additional details on her D drawings. I can't remember some of the other stuff. But, yeah, we pretty much have that all together. We'll send that out.
Okay.
Has that area been stabilized? Is it stabilized?
Yeah. And the fence has been installed, so make sure everybody knows over construction in this area.
Now, there was some comments that I received, should be in, just from other people about a large mound of material in the back, or whether it's been pushed over the slope. Is that all part of that area that they're talking about going down to the National Grid substation?
There shouldn't be a, I've not been there.
No.
I'm saying there,
The processing area in the back, I think, is what
Oh, no,
the
that's not-
chairperson is talking about.
Property.
okay.
That you,
Where
where all of the,
question is on the other side, near where the proposed office is. As that access road takes a
What
bend.
is that? What is that?
just in back where they're processing the stuff, where the retention pond is going to be, or actually behind it, not in the retention pond area, they're actually past that. And that's where they brought all the material out of the Aldi's pad, sifted it all and brought back the good stuff for the dynamic compaction.
Okay.
As for the rest of it, you have a decent amount of stone material there as well.
Yeah,
which will
so
be-
that's back in here, the National Grid. That's in questions up in this area.
Okay.
And when we were at the meeting last, we talked about the National Grid utilities that are on adjacent to Aldi's and behind the potential Aroma Joe's, and there was going to be some discussion about whether or not National Grid had been notified and was of the site plan changes that are proposed. and they-
Yeah, I believe they were just out on site last week talking with the contractor.
So maybe we could get something in writing about that, or like somebody else in attendance that, so that we don't have
That the
this.
contractor's communicating with National Grid.
There wasn't a discussion about possibly having to move those?
Right. well,
There was a
that's-
switch
they've
gear,
been,
yeah.
You know, they've been sent, National Grid's been sent this site plan and they have no objection to.
Oh, yeah, they've been out several times. That's how these locations came up with their coordination, yeah.
It's in close proximity to some elements of a piece of equipment, right? I think it's prudent that we have something that says that they have to take ownership.
There ballards are on those things?
Yeah.
The piles in the back, are they gonna be, is that ground gonna be returned to the way it was before you were out there?
They'll all be gone.
Do we have any other questions?
The comment about the traffic counts, and I didn't realize this the last time you were here, and I apologize. When this was brought before us, but these traffic counts do not include Planet Fitness in the counts that were presented to us. It's just the new proposed uses.
Okay,
That's correct.
we can include that. I did not realize that. I would just throw that in there. Yeah.
Wayne, did you get those cumulative?
I did.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, there was some discussion about the timing of when the traffic would be coming in and out. Roma Joe's would mostly be in the morning, Aldi's would mostly be later in the day. And KFC is, I don't know, if they serve breakfast, but other than that,
No, they're lunch and hour.
But when those days are.
Yeah,
So-
Wendy's Thursday.
yeah, Wendy's, right? So we did have some discussion about the cumulative impacts and timing of when traffic would be coming in and out. And he was right there. Planet Fitness is not in cumulative analysis.
We'll just have to grab that right from their original contract that was done. Yeah.
The only other question I have is on that revised retaining wall. You're proposing like a crest wall? Is that what you're putting in next to National Grid?
Yeah, no, that's not part of this application.
I know, but for my own
But
satisfaction.
yes, so what we're looking at is putting a reinforced slope. Kind of
Like a
right behind,
the geosynthetic reinforced
yes,
system.
yeah, and we'll have geogrid layers as we go up. I believe they're like every 2 feet.
You're gonna submit that to,
Yeah, Terracon, who is the consultant on that, is working with the applicant on those details. Yes.
that should be approved by us.
Yes, well, we've been sending any correspondence we get or when we do this, it's going through the town. Yeah. I can add you to the list.
If you would.
Yeah.
There was a comment made on the public hearing about public transportation stop in relation
I
to,
think there's one here, I believe.
I believe you're correct. I think that that's in the plans for the Hannaford. I think that was part of the Hannaford plan.
I think the plan is to put a cross in there, right? Because that's where the light's gonna be, right?
where there's an
The
existing
bus stop
one
is just
here,
beyond,
and I think they're gonna put one.
in the
yeah.
eastbound and the westbound direction, is just beyond Lord Ave.
Yeah.
There's gonna, there's a.
There's an
there'll be a
existing
pedestrian
crosswalk right,
crossing there.
right there.
There's also one eastbound,
Is it
somewhere in there.
I thought it was further down.
It might just be up, maybe just off the page.
I thought there was one back towards,
Sutherland Farms, isn't it?
yeah,
More like around Hillcrest.
Oh, it may be. There's one across, there might be one just off
Hillcrest and Killick,
off the page here.
right, right? It's right by Hillcrest. It's Hillcrest and then the other direction is Killick. Is it Killick? Yeah.
Okay, so there's one here, then there may be another one right down here, Hillcrest.
And then it doesn't stop again for this.
So maybe, what are the plans for pedestrian traffic through from that corner? That would be the northwest corner.
So there's sidewalks
they have
here.
dedicated sidewalk.
Yep, sidewalks,
I'll put that
crosswalks, to get to here.
Okay.
Or you can continue this way. You can come up to the lanes. There's a sidewalk, it's just in that, goes throughout the entire site. That hasn't.
So basically, you're gonna use the sidewalk to get to the entrance of where you want. Yeah. All right. All right. Any other questions? I believe that we want to get more complete traffic studies for our next.
Yeah, we
meeting.
should have an update, that includes the additional traffic and business.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's just a matter of copying the right chart on the report.
So, with that in mind, and plus the fact we would probably want to have all of the comments made at the public hearing, formal written response.
We can do that fairly quickly.
Yeah. You have that available before our next meeting as far as.
We would like, I'm just trying to go backwards and I don't know if there's a way. As you know, this application had several amendments to the site plan. Some more minor in nature, and this one being major in nature. And we do have ZBA, we were in front of the ZBA, had the public hearing there. We can't move forward until we get a secret determination from this board, which we're hoping to possibly go through at the next meeting as well, to be able to get on to that meeting. So then that meeting, the next one is Monday. Obviously, we're not going to hit next Monday for the ZBA, so that would be the July meeting. Would the approval process be for all minor and major items all at once? Okay.
Right, because that, it is one application for amendments, there are a number of them. The seeker review will cover all, yeah, so there'll be one action. I would think if this is ready for your July 7th meeting, Wayne and the board at the time to review the responses. And I mean, procedurally, you've held your public hearing, it's been referred to the county, you've received public comments, responses to public comments, additional traffic information that's required, and deliberation. You could take action at your next meeting.
Okay.
Procedurally, you could, if the board is satisfied with the information that's been submitted.
Right, so my understanding is, so we're looking for a secret determination, right? To be able to go back to the ZBA for
That's
them to
correct.
make their determination. So if the next meeting, is it the 7th?
Yes.
If that's on the 7th, the secret determination is on the 7th, the next ZBA is
Like the third Monday.
whatever that third Monday is, and then your next meeting, I think, is also that Thursday of that.
July 18th would be after the
18th or 21st.
21st.
So that would be the
20
kind of the timeline that we would be,
But zoning is at the 18th. Zoning is ahead of planning in July.
which is okay, because if we do the secret information on the 7th, that will at least be in place for the ZBA. ZBA
On the
can do
18th.
their
Gotcha. Yeah.
determination, and when we come back to the planning board on that Thursday for possible determination.
It sounds like a feasible timeline.
So it will be important to get additional traffic information as soon as possible, so Wayne and the board has a chance to review it, because that will impact the secret information.
Yeah, it's just a matter of combining the original with the proposed. Yep. we can do that.
Wayne, any other outstanding seeker issues that you see that could complete the seeker record for discussion July
Yeah,
7th?
they updated the stormwater, they updated the SWIP. It was pretty minor, amendments to that. I can't think of anything else.
I would only comment for the record too on the issue of erosion and sediment control of the stormwater, and whatever discussions with National Grid, that you continue to coordinate with the town. It should go to Wayne and it should go to Bill Bradley. So ultimately the town will need to confirm compliance.
I know
Bring
Bill,
in the stormwater.
I know Bill visits the site frequently.
Okay.
With them.
We've been CC'd on everything since the start. Wayne, I'll loop you in.
I support it.
I was getting some of that correspondence, so this isn't a cold shot.
So, we will adjourn you to our next meeting on the 7th.
Okay.
At which point, hopefully, we'll be able to do a secret determination, and we'll move forward.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good night.
The next on our agenda is the Whitbeck minor subdivision. Thank you. All right, there was a requirement by the town board to approve a waiver for the number of houses or building lots at the end of Dead End Street. And I believe that has been approved. It has been approved. So we're now at a point where, because it's a minor subdivision, we are required to have a public hearing. But is there any updates on that that would need to be heard by this board?
There's been no updates made to the plan. Everything is exactly the same as what we had first proposed. We're ready to proceed.
Okay. We will probably, now at this point, probably schedule a public hearing for the 21st of July.
Okay.
All right. We do have a public hearing scheduled for our next meeting, tentatively, so
You got,
we require,
you got 2 weeks this time here.
We have a buy, yeah, because the next meeting doesn't start till the 7th.
2 weeks. And so, instead of the
A total of 3 weeks until the next meeting.
Correct.
Could do it the 7th.
I gotta
right
get,
now, we haven't got to them on the agenda of our next Atlas Renewables. We did have a tentative date for their public hearing on the 7th. So you want to have 2 public hearings on the 7th?
Mr. Whitbeck's been waiting for quite a while, so
Yeah, we've been,
this
it's
is,
been several months now trying to get moving with this. And anything we can do to expedite it, we greatly appreciate.
I'd like to refer to council on this, is that 3 weeks is the acceptable, is an acceptable notice period.
In terms of the publication requirements, yes, they can be met. It's not- They cannot be met for 2 weeks in
2
between.
weeks.
There's, because of the calendar, there's 3 weeks before the next meeting. It could be noticed next week for the meeting on the 7th.
Does anyone have any problems with 2 public hearings?
How quick does
It'll be the second
address
public
list have to come to you?
Next week.
hearing. All right, I got one scheduled there.
Well, let's,
So you would be scheduled for 7:15
Okay.
on
we
the
gotta get to
7th.
the paper. I mean, we gotta do the mailings 10 days before.
Okay.
So, whatever the 10, maybe not next week,
All right.
but pretty close.
Yeah, I'll get it to you next week. Yeah.
I have no other questions. Does the board have any questions? Wayne, do you have any other questions?
No.
Dave, do you have any other comments?
Do we have to do an ag data thing in that? or-
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to check my packet. Try to see if
I thought we did that.
Yeah, I thought we did too. Initially, I thought, well, when you gave me
Been so
that.
long.
I thought I handed one in date, but it's been a long time. I'll review all that and see, just so we don't get figuring on that.
All right,
I was diverted. It's July 7th now,
Yes.
time?
7:15. Okay,
Very good.
we'll see you on the 7th.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay, third on our agenda is the Atlas renewables. And as far as I can tell by the minutes, this is just an update. We did tentatively schedule you for your public hearing on the 7th at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
So we try to honor that, obviously. So if you have anything that you wish to further discuss with us, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just opportunity to check with, especially
You're gonna have to speak up.
just opportunity to check if Mr. Bonsfield has some comments on the stormwater pollution prevention plan or the site planning. We have been checking some information, and just opportunity to check if he has some comments.
Yeah, I'm well into my review. I didn't have a chance to finish writing everything up, but I do have some comments that I'd like to have addressed this evening, so we can keep moving along. The full-size plans are scale is tough to read. And it's at an odd scale, it's like, I'm not even sure, 225. If you could at least give me larger scale plans of the actual site where the array is and the road network. I can't see any detail, such as where the interconnect is. It looks like a little tiny square right there in the middle of the plan.
So it's okay if we prepare two different set of documents, one of the interconnection and one of the array?
That's fine. Give me like blow-ups of the critical spots. In your details, you show a temporary staging area, but I didn't see it on the plan. If you could identify where that temporary staging area is going to be.
I think on the, not in this set of documents, I think it's the drawing included in the stormwater pollution correction plan. So apart from this,
Oh, it might be in the stormwater plan, but not on these plans?
correct. This plan is including the measurements, the erosion measurements, so the plan included on the stormwater pollution correction plan, that is including this.
what is the status of the response from the SHPO?
Moving on the security measure.
Haven't received that. You need that both for seeker and for, the stormwater SWIP. Most of my comments are on the storm, will be on the stormwater. There's some information in the write-up from Francis Fossilini that is missing. Maybe another critical issue is the gravel road. It's not counted as the impervious area in the post-construction. So we'll have to update that portion of it. There's a bunch of parameters that were used in the design. I mean, they're in the calculations, but they're not in the body of the report. I can itemize those and get that out right to you.
Okay, thank you.
I think that is the gist of comments at this point.
Thank you, very appreciate it. We'll prepare this.
I'll get something in writing you today or Monday. So you can have all that information.
If you consider that the conference between you, Francis Fossilini, and our small business team,
I'm okay with that. It's best to talk them to doing the design and stormwater design.
I have a question. Which you're discussing here and everything. Does this alter the material that will be available for public review? And would that affect possibly determining whether we can have a public hearing, whether the application?
A lot of times, we're always kind of tweaking the stormwater, so I don't think the stormwater issues,
No, you know, public perspective probably is very low on the total.
right. I mean, a set of plans that are at an acceptable scale, a suitable scale, probably should be made available to the building department so that anybody who wants to look at the plans can read them. Even some of the text is really small.
we can provide this set of plans by early next week. Absolutely. This issue of the
I mean, the position of the road, the array is not going to change. The access, the power, running the power into the poles and poles are going to be in the same place, all that. It's not going to change.
Okay. Refer to Andy, if they get a set of plans in early next week for public review.
Absolutely, because the notice is not going to be out and published until next week.
All right. So then we're going to continue with having your, scheduling your public hearing on the 7th. Thank you.
And one issue on that is there will be discussion at the zoning board Monday evening on the option of a joint public hearing
Right.
that you've done on the larger solar projects. And if they'll agree to hold a special meeting on July 7th at 7 o'clock for purposes of holding a joint public hearing. So they'll have the variance public hearing, and the board will have a public hearing on the special use permit site plan as you've done in the past. But that'll be discussed Monday night at the zoning board.
Okay. All right. So, we will schedule the public hearing for 7 o'clock here the first time. And, we'll go from there. Okay, is there anything else you wish to expound on? Anybody have any questions? move on? All right, I think you're all set. We'll see you on the 7th. Okay, on our agenda, I had mentioned as a fourth item that the proposed Brunswick zoning law amendments, and that would be for planning board committee members' discussion. It doesn't involve applicants or anything like that, so we'll postpone that right now and put that on after new business, so we're gonna go right into new business. First on new business is the Olson Development Site Plan. We also have several other items under new business. The waiver of subdivision for Patton, and the determination on the Bald Mountain Road application as far as minor. All right. You have the floor, welcome back.
Thank you.
Haven't seen you in a while.
No, it's been a while. Greg Besta, Craig Manning Engineering, representing Boston Development for the medical office building proposed at 112 Chestnut Avenue. I'm going to give just a very brief high-level overview, and then Eric Green from BDL Medical is here as well to go over some of the building components. The building is a two-story, 24,386 square foot medical office building. It's going to house upstate endoscopy and ortho.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? It's gonna have what?
It's going to house upstate endoscopy and ortho New York. Municipal water is available. It's an 8-inch water main here. We'll be connecting into to serve the building. Sanitary sewer presently is proposed to connect to an existing sanitary sewer manhole in that location. Presently, that particular sewer is private. We believe there's an agreement in place for us to be able to connect to that. The next steps will be to go through the process of investigating that sewer and the sewer manholes from that portion, from that connection point to Route 7, ultimately to have the town take over ownership of that particular project. Stormwater management, it will consist of infiltration chambers. We have included a lighting plan and a landscaping plan in our documents, as well as a draft SWIP. I'd like to turn it over here briefly to Eric to go through the building and you'll be open to any questions. I'd like to give some presentation.
This is a render image of the two-story, 21,000 square foot medical office building.
You talking to the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
You can take it off.
It's a rendered image of the two-story, 24,000 square foot medical office building. The exterior facade consists of a cultured stone veneer as well as a fiber cement product along on the top. 12,000 square foot each floor, 1 tenant on the first floor, 2 tenants on the second floor. And in the back are the 4 elevations. So this would be the front elevation, looking at the building from Route 7, and then the side elevation, south elevation, north, and the back elevation.
Height to the center tower,
So height to the
Elevation height.
center is 36 feet.
need a variance, can't go over 30.
Okay, that was one of our questions we had. Main roof is 28 feet, but we were questioning so we will need a variance for that.
So you got 3 tenants?
There will be 3 tenants. There's 2 that are on board with the project as of now.
On the plans, it'd be nice if you could connect the building to the Price Chopper Plaza by foot. So if people wanted to go get lunch or something, they didn't have to hop in a car to get there. There's a coffee shop in the, in the first plaza, and then there's Price Choppers. And nice if you didn't have to get in your car and drive around to get there.
Looking at that drawing, isn't there a road that goes over towards the apartments? What is that? Am I missing something?
No, it's there.
Runs right down through here.
Okay,
Seems to be obscured by trees in the photo, but it is there.
okay. And Dave, you're talking about getting a pedestrian walkway, probably right in that area. I think there's a stop sign.
I would suggest down there.
We would have to be in this area here.
Yeah.
There's a grade
There's a-
down through there, so
The water retention area too, isn't
You
there?
don't want to put a zip line.
I believe it's on this. That does sound fun, but
Well, you got that 36-foot
patience.
tower.
Use it for something.
I think it looks like there's sidewalk on the, if they came across there. I don't know if that's sidewalk or what it is, but it's.
There are, I believe, currently 2 stop signs at that intersection. One going out of Price Chopper and one coming in from McChesney Avenue. But the traffic coming down from the apartments is just free flowing. And if you're gonna put a crosswalk there, you're gonna need another stop sign.
We'll have to look at that.
I think that's a private road.
But you don't have any jurisdiction over that road. They just have owned by the apartment.
That's a private road. We have no jurisdiction.
You can have an unsignalized crosswalk, just have a sign.
It does get a little cumbersome coming out of where the coffee shop is, because there's a stop sign there. And you gotta flip up, kind of get over a little bit to get the second stop sign. There's a way of cleaning that up.
You can't see up the road to the apartment is leaving the Price Chopper parking lot unless you have the ability to turn your head like an owl. And so you have to inch all the way up into the center of the intersection to look up and see if there's any cars, which is kind of counterproductive, because if there was, they would have hit you at that point.
But the apartments are pretty easy to work with. I'm sure they.
I wonder if they'd be receptive to having the stop sign at the entrance there, and then clean that up a little bit, you know what I
That
mean?
one here,
Yeah,
one here.
One there, and then there's one across the street to the north.
It's a pretty great differential.
if you guys could look into that, see if you can, I mean, I agree, I think, a pedestrian walkway over there to have access would be probably a plus. Of course, you may get people parking there and then rolling over there too, so that's another thing we may have to look at too. So. Now, I believe you had a sketch plan review, and I believe the fire department actually made a comment list on that. Did you receive that? The sketch plan?
If I can interrupt this for a second, the sketch plan layout is different than what is proposed here. The building's been rotated.
Yeah, but the fire company doesn't know that. Yeah.
So we've also provided a loop road all the way around behind the
We were told
building.
that was
So
their.
I would suggest that, you know, when you get into a situation where, you know, you're pretty well set on the site plan, that you go back to the fire company. This would be also one, I believe. And they issued, this is what they had on the last one. Thought you had on the- All right, well,
You will right now, Greg.
anyone have any questions at this point?
The pharmacy is.
Not as far as a, where folks would come to a pharmacy. The endoscopy center itself has a, they,
I see this little thing down on the bottom right corner. Yeah, what is it?
this would be a transformer pad and generator pad.
Oh,
And then waste dumpsters would be up on this corner.
you gotta put some bollards in there on that. So.
Certainly, yes. Yep.
And, you know, talking about pedestrian traffic, just, you know, right over Price Chopper, there's a pharmacy. So people may be inclined to use that pharmacy when they have an office.
Sure.
Is right?
I think last time we talked about along the roadway.
So I think it would go underground from here, around the back.
You talk about the existing power pole? Yeah, originally in the concept, the entrance road was right,
Right.
power
So
pole was right in the middle of it.
Okay.
So we moved the entrance in that direction, so the power pole now is
Yeah.
not a congregation anymore.
Thank you very much.
And that was pretty standard response from the fire company. All right. Do we have any questions? Well, I wanted to get you, you know, in front of us now, to do business, to get you into our formal agenda process. So we can get some more updates maybe on the next meeting on the 7th. Moving forward. I would say that one of the things you probably should do is contact the fire company. It looks like you have access to the building, so on how to space. How many parking places are there?
We have 115, 135 is required. We have banked 27 in the rear of the building if necessary.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that. I remember there was conversations about banking parking places. How does that add up with the required number and so forth?
How many is actual? 135.
That's a good question. I've never heard of that concept either.
115.
Yeah. Why are you banking them? I mean, what's this banking concept? Why not just have, are you gonna pave there, or is that gonna be? How many do you think?
Mr. Paulson has his hand up.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Rich Paulson. And the reason from a previous experience, having an ambulatory surgery center, they'll only see about 40 to 45 patients a day for that 12,000 square feet. So I have two buildings that we have built where we have built the parking ratio as required by the town, and it just looks like an open sea of parking spots. So I want to maintain the green area, but I'm willing to bank and even put money in escrow for the first year, you know, to prove to the town that the parking is sufficient for this site. I just want to keep as much green area and not just have a sea of parking spaces. So the reason behind it is just having an ambulatory surgery center there. It's not clinical like Ortho New York, which will see many more patients per hour than ambulatory surgery center.
Okay.
So that's the reason behind it. I can bring pictures to the next meeting showing you parking lots that I have that are empty. So,
It makes sense.
yeah, and I'm willing to bank it, and then you can require me later on. There's nothing worse for a landlord to have not enough parking. So if I find out that we're short and I'm partners with the two tenants who are behind this, we will of course want to make sure that we have the proper parking for the patients.
So will the stormwater include 27?
Yes.
Yeah. Stormwater management design will include the 27 parking like it's gonna be built.
Yeah.
And then if they have to come back and build it, it's already, they don't have to increase the size of their potential for stormwater.
You're still utilizing our existing stormwater facility along the south side? Yeah.
No,
You're not.
we're using on-site infiltration chambers on-site, and post-development is center equal to 3.
The parking there shows all the parking, including the banking, or
It shows on the site plans, shows the bank parking to the rear.
How, Andy, procedurally, is there any type of variance or waiver that they have to give in regard to the parking?
I'll look at that under our code with Wayne. This is not unusual on projects that involve projects where this approach is done. And it's just as the applicant says, it's to avoid, if I could call it this, the Walmart effect of just a sea of parking. But the bank can keep as green space the area to meet the minimum parking standards. So it's not an unusual approach. It does make a lot of sense, but I'll review with Wayne and with Chuck how that's handled. We've not done that in Brunswick before. We'll just check the site plan regs for how that should be done.
Yeah, I believe, Andy, that bank parking is allowed in the ordinance. I think it's in there.
Did you look at the site distance pulling out of that driveway?
We have not.
There's kind of a curve there. You guys could kind of check out what the site distance is pulling out.
It is fairly level, right? You don't start heading down the dip till later. So it's,
We're required to get a driveway permit from Medicine County as well.
Do we have any other questions? Wayne, are you all set with now?
that, the site plan that you have there, I could get to the fire department. If I had an extra copy. I don't know if you have that in this
We
package.
had
Greg?
11 copies, I think, that we gave the town.
Yeah, and one has to go to the county and complete.
Okay, so you need a new one then.
Yeah, just of that, I think would suffice the fire department guys to show that
I can give you this picture, you want this one?
it works.
There you go. Anything to save time.
I was gonna say, I'll certainly take it off the poster board.
Well, I want the poster board back.
All right, I don't think we have any other questions, but I'd like to put you on the agenda for our next meeting, get an update, and keep the project moving along.
I assume we have comments from you before then?
I'll do my best. I think they should do
That is a beauty, yeah.
with the holiday and
That is a
everything.
nice one, yeah.
I could have comments in time for the next meeting.
That's
I'll
July
note that in
7th.
here, 'cause
Last time it's 3 weeks,
I won't be here, so.
just as a, well, you don't have to be, I mean, we have 2 public hearings, if you want to go to 21st, that's fine too.
No, I mean personally, I won't be.
No, I mean, well, I'm just saying, from an applicant's point of view,
You want it?
I'm open at July 7th, so I'd like to, July 21st.
You want to push to the
Yeah.
21st?
And I'll give you time to make sure they have comments available. July
Then
21st.
I can get
Okay.
comments ahead of the next meeting,
Yeah.
ahead of the next
And we'll be on respond.
And then I'll be able to respond to that before the next meeting.
Appreciate that.
That works.
Yeah, we can get loaded up real quick this time of the year, so, yeah, that'd be great. Perfect.
Thanks.
Eric, you have last thing?
No other questions?
And you're with
BBL Construction Services.
Okay, we have two other items on the new business. The other one, first one, let's take care of the 182 Ball Mountain Road. That was the one that we had a question whether it was a major or so forth and so on. I'm not so sure. Did you receive an application for a minor subdivision?
I don't know. I was not in the office today. I know we asked the gentleman to, or we told the gentleman that was the decision, it was going to be a minor. I do not know. I would assume that you do not have the application in front of you, a minor was not filled out.
Okay, I don't have it, so we'll just put them on hold for now.
Is there a time limit on when you're doing like a minor or major, like a waiver's, what, 7 years?
Correct.
So is there a time limit on minors and majors or not?
There's not, but it does give rise to the issue of segmentation and cumulative environmental impacts under secret.
So this will be a minor or a major or ever?
So what was discussed in those minutes, you're right, is the current application would be a minor subdivision, but if any further subdivision of the remainder parcel, the board discussed, that would be a major subdivision. And you would look at, is there a set time frame on when you look back for cumulative or segmented review? No, but you do look back and see it, was this part of an overall plan of development? And if yes, then you do that kind of cumulative review, and most particularly for stormwater. If it's in the same watershed.
And then the two lots, one is 5 acres and one's 50 acres, 9 acres.
Yeah.
You do it on both lots then? I mean, a 5 acre lot, you could break up into 5 building lots. So you do if you split this lot, a smaller lot, is that a major?
Fair point.
I have lots of time to think, driving tractors. That's not to the betterment of some of the town people.
Well, I think if we're considering this a minor, if it rises to the level of a major, then it's a major.
Yeah, but does it go with each lot?
Yeah.
Well, I thought the conversation really was centered around, this was a new owner.
Yeah.
Of this property.
Yeah, right.
And it did qualify for a waiver because there was some type of subdivision on that total property within 7 years. And then the discussion was whether it should be a major based on the total number or a minor. And we decided, I believe, at our meeting, that we would consider it a minor because it's only a 2-lot subdivision. There was no waiver involved, so that's pretty much where.
Well,
You know, if he comes back again, then it's
Previous
a major.
waiver,
Well, no, yeah,
Well, that's
That's
Dave's
what-
question, which
Yeah.
is, there's a 5 acre building lot and a 90 acre plus or minus remainder lot. If he came in and sought to subdivide further building lots off the 90 remainder, would that be considered major? I think that's what the board discussed previously. The answer would be yes.
I would,
Dave's question is, but what if he comes in and further subdivides the 5 acre lot to create more building lots? Is that also a major?
I would say so.
And then there's no 7-year time limit. This is what this property has been, the history of this property. It doesn't sunset unless the board feels like it's.
This is where we're getting into those are not easy questions to answer. They're not answered directly in the town's subdivision regulations. And it's really a question, I know the board discussed what does the current application need to be, and if there's further subdivision, it would be deemed a major. But I do think if it's done in a year, right, then this is gonna be clearly, in the opinion of the board, and ultimately the building department has to concur, would be a major. But what if it sits back for 20 years, and then they come in and want to divide off another lot? Is that gonna be a major? And that probably should at that point be revisited by the building department and the board. Certainly the minutes reflected that the current application would be a minor. I think the minutes said if any further subdivision, I don't know if it said of the remainder parcel or of the property, but maybe we should clarify that any further subdivision of the property would be deemed a major. And there it is, but then I would think the board and the building department could consider that in the future.
Should the applicant know the informed of that before we move forward? In case he wants to maybe divide it into 3 lots, like still qualifies for a minor.
Sure. Now, I say all of this,
Well, it's not just the.
Yeah.
I think we gave him a minor because he was splitting one lot off.
Mhm.
If he's starting to split 2 or 3 lots, I mean, he's already a major. I mean,
and while the board has discussed this, and it is noted that the board had this discussion in the minutes, ultimately, the determination is by the code enforcement officer. That is the first line of interpretation about what the zoning law, the site plan, and the subdivision regs mean. So the board can certainly discuss it. It certainly can opine on minor or major, but ultimately it's a building department determination. If the building department says it has to be a major, and the applicant says, no, you're wrong, well, an applicant has a right to appeal that determination to the zoning board, and the zoning board would interpret what those regs mean.
Okay.
So the planning board doesn't have the jurisdiction to interpret what the zoning law and the regs mean, but that discussion, I think, was helpful, particularly since the building department is present, what the board would consider. And I think the building department concurred that the current application was appropriately deemed to require a minor subdivision.
I agree with you, Russ, too, though, but we should have that information to the applicant. Because it may very well, like you say, if he was planning on doing another division of that 5-acre lot, he should know that up front. Because we would do that now and have it be a minor rather than next time around, which would become a major. So I texted my team to see if the application was in, I wasn't aware of it. So they haven't gotten back to me yet.
Okay, and we'll just wait for an application to appear and then put them under new business when they come. All right?
Sounds good.
Okay, the application, waiver of subdivision was submitted and just received tonight from Richard and Lynn Patton. This is at 250 Pinewoods Avenue. It looks to me like this is a lot line adjustment. 18 feet, 18 and a half foot, basically 20-foot strip.
When you go out and look at the site, it's the strip of the trees. Denise does not want to maintain under the trees anymore, so she's going to give them to her brother.
Okay. I mean, I don't see any real problems here. It's not, it's not a building lot, it's strictly a lot line adjustment, which falls under our waiver of subdivision. I don't see any reason why we just can't put them on our agenda for our next meeting. And move forward with that. So they are on our agenda. Yeah, I don't know of any other new business. So I think at this point, I'd like to just go over the agenda for our next meeting. I have we have two public hearings. The first one's at 7:00, and that's Atlas Renewables. That's a special use permit site plan for the solar farm. And then at 7:15, we have the Whitbeck minor subdivision, scheduled for 7:15, like I said. So those two items are on the agenda. Leon is on the agenda. And I have from prior meetings that Silas major subdivision
Yes,
was
on the
again
7th.
scheduled for the 7th.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then we just put that.
and we put Patton.
Wendy did get back to me and there was not a minor application put in,
Okay,
so.
so look at her.
8:30. Huh?
Is
I said, look at her, 8:30.
there anything else that
Probably in a
anybody
treadmill or a glass of
knows
wine.
that we had scheduled before?
Well, Cooper was without the,
Cooper was without date because they have a legal problem with
Pending violation.
pending violation.
I had,
we had-
just, I took a picture of the board, Russ, and for just the new business on the 7th, another solar application. This one is at 196 Town Office Road. That's Placid Stables. They wanted to come in on the 7th.
It's under new business, okay?
Yes.
So in addition to what we just mentioned, we have one item under new business, which we don't put on it.
Exactly.
All right. Anyone else have anything that you have a question about? Okay. So last on our agenda, at our last meeting, we got copies, draft copies of the new zoning laws, amendments. And Andy, and I talked about this today, we'd like to go over, review some certain sections right now. I assume everybody read these from, front to back and probably has a bunch of questions and notes.
I'm on my third time.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So Andy, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. There are certain areas that we thought we would want to address immediately. What we have to do is we have to review this, make any comments or recommendations to the town board. Tentatively, right now, they have their first public hearing on this scheduled for the 11th of July.
Correct.
You don't necessarily have to have our comments in by then, but I think we ought to move forward and try to get something together by at least our meeting on the 21st of July. Does that seem like a reasonable? So, some of the areas that Andy was talking about was the overlay, the two-family and multiple family density calculations, and the overlay districts. Why don't we,
Sure.
first,
So, one of the what I think can be deemed the major proposed revision deals with two-family and multifamily uses, which this board has noted to the town board in the past. And so the first proposed amendment is to change the zoning districts in which multifamily housing would be an allowed use. And what the proposal is to remove multifamily as an allowable use. And remember, multifamily is 3 or more units, two-family, just 2 units. So the proposal would be to remove multifamily as an allowable use in the R25 zoning district from what was previously called the business light overlay, but what's now proposed to be called the highway commercial, and that's pretty much from 278 east on 7 to the town line. Right, Jason, for you.
There goes that plan.
And from what was previously identified as the hamlet districts, but what is proposed now to be recast as a local business district. So multifamily housing would be removed from those 3 districts. The only district which it would still be allowed is the R40 district. It is currently allowed in the R40 district, and it would remain allowed in the R40 district. So one of the things the board to do is take a look at the zoning map and see where the R40 districts are shown, and that's where multifamily housing would be allowed. That's the first thing for you to consider.
One of the things I think, looking at the map, when you have multifamily, you're talking about apartments or condos or something like that. There's access to public sewers and
Correct. That leads directly into the next component of what the proposal to amend how the town regulates multifamily housing, which also amends the way the town will regulate the number of allowable lots in a subdivision. And so the first thing though was what zoning districts would multifamily housing be allowed in? Currently, it's in multiple zoning districts. The proposal is to have it allowable only in the R40 zoning district. And so the second factor then is the proposal is to add a density calculation. A little back up on this. In the old Brunswick zoning ordinance, the way that ordinance was written, and that was the zoning in town from the mid-50s until this was changed in 2017, was multifamily was allowed in any zoning district in the town, subject to special use permit review. And under the ordinance, that was in front of the zoning board. But there was a limitation placed, a density cap of 9,000 square feet per unit. And what that amounts to, give or take, is like 4.5 units per acre, give or take. And so while you could propose multifamily anywhere and present that as a special use permit application to the zoning board, you were limited under the ordinance to the number of units you could get on the property, and it was the arbitrary number of 9,000 square feet per unit. When the 2017 zoning ordinance was passed, there was no density cap carried over. And so what happened was multifamily was allowable in multiple zoning districts, but there was no density factor or density cap. Even an arbitrary 9,000 square feet was not included in the 2017 zoning law. So in addition to reducing the number of zoning districts in which multifamily housing is permitted, there's now the addition of a proposed density cap. And there's a couple of things to focus on when you're looking at this. if you have the red line version of the zoning law, the one with the proposed changes that's marked draft, first thing is to look at pages 9 and 10. This is within the definition section. So if we first go to page 10, now we've got a definition of density factor. And that's defined now as the maximum allowable number of residential units that may be permitted on one lot, or the maximum allowable number of lots that may be created through a subdivision. This amendment now will put back into the zoning law a density factor, density calculation. It's proposed to apply both to the number of multifamily units, but also apply to the number of residential lots through the subdivision process. Okay. Now, if you go back to page 9, there was discussion about, well, how would the town do a density cap? One option would be simply to put back in the 9,000 square foot per unit for multifamily housing. I will tell you that, in my opinion, and this was the opinion of the town's planning consultant as well, the more current way of doing a density calculation is to actually look at the land itself. And the proposal is to consider what amounts to buildable areas on the property and to remove constrained lands, and I'll go through that in a minute. And the concept for doing that is, if you've got, for instance, a 40-acre lot, and you had a density factor of 1 unit per acre, the easy math would be you can get 40 units, or you can get 40 lots. But if you got a piece of property where you could never build on 40 acres because part of it has wetlands and you got to take out buildings and you got steep slopes and things like that, you could never build on that anyway. So out of the 40 acres, if you've got 10 acres that you could never build on, the proposal would be that shouldn't be counted toward the number of units you can get. You can never build on that anyway because of regulatory constraints. So those come out. That's the concept of constrained land. It's basically non-buildable land. So if you look at page 9, now there's a definition of constrained land. And it's defined as a parcel's acreage that includes existing buildings. You're not going to build where an existing building is, unless the building is proposed to be removed. Then it becomes a buildable area, right? Surface water bodies, DEC regulated wetlands, federally regulated wetlands, 50% of the acreage covered by the 100-year floodplain, entire floodway areas, in lands with slopes of 15% or greater. These are generally accepted land conditions that generally are not buildable. So what an applicant would need to do is take a look at the property and figure out, based on this definition, what's the acreage of my constrained land? Okay? Now,
I got a question.
yes.
In particular on where you have the slopes of 50% or greater, what happens if the applicant says, well, I can correct it by adding or subtracting fill? Does it now
No.
become a,
You
No.
take the land in a raw condition, that's the way these are.
that's it, okay.
This is done, I'll give you this example. And not because it's something I'm doing, but I've gone through this recently on a project downstate. It's the same type of calculation. Wayne's prior firm is involved in this particular project. And what the code there requires is the same thing. The applicant is required to take a look at the property and go through the calculation based on existing conditions to determine what the total lot count would be. And this is a particular piece of property that's 500 acres in size, and based on going through this calculation, there's only 166 lots that are allowable. Even on a 500-acre site, because these constrained lands had to be removed. Not that we couldn't have graded, moved dirt around, reduced slopes, things like that. You do the calculation based on the existing site conditions. That then determines your total allowable lot count. Then you design your proposal based on that lot count. And you have to submit that calculation into the municipality so they can review it and concur your total lot count or total unit count is calculated properly. This is the concept here. Okay? The next page to go to is page 36. And this is really the heart of how this would be implemented. And there's this new section 160-21, the density calculation. And it generally is what I've just described. The base density is the measurement of the capacity of a parcel or parcels, if they're adjacent, to support development sites as expressed in the number of dwelling units or the number of lots. That base density will give you your lot or your unit calculation. And again, you calculate base density by determining the acreage first of the constrained land, based on that definition where we just went through. Step 2, you calculate the gross buildable acreage by subtracting this constrained acreage from the total acreage of the parcel. Step 3, you calculate the base density by dividing that gross buildable acreage by the zoning district you're in. We'll get there in a moment. And then if the math works out so that it's a fraction, right, because it could, then the base density fractional units equal to or greater than 0.5 get rounded up.
I made a little note to myself, Andy, in section 3A.
Yep.
The first line, it says, determine the acreage of constrained land, which is the combined parcel cover. I don't get that.
That wording is, you're correct, the catch. The wording makes no sense. It's, which is the combined, it should be like area on the parcel covered by existing buildings. So they're missing the word there.
See, I actually learned.
Well done. So that's a proposed density calculation to get number of lot counts. So you get the buildable acreage on the project site. Then how do you figure out the actual lot count? Then you go to the bulk table at the end. And then the bulk table goes through, a column has been added to this. This is your area and bulk table about what minimum lot size it needs to be, depending on what particular zoning district you're in. Well, it should be in your packet.
Second to the left.
It's right toward the very end. It was
Oh, there's one.
Yeah.
right in front of the zoning map.
Right in front of that. Keep going, keep going.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So there's an important additional point to be made here, which is you'll note that there's an additional column that's been added to this bulk table called density. So along the top, you've got first the particular zoning districts. Are you with me? Okay. And then the next category is minimum lot size within each particular zoning district. The next column is what's been added here, and that's now density. And this requires the density factor, okay? And so here it really does cover what the dividing is. If you've got 10 acres, you've got to divide, and you're in the A40 zoning district, you've got 10 what amounts to buildable acres. Then you divide that by 40,000 square feet per lot. and that'll give you your total lot count that you can get. If you had 10 acres of buildable land in the 840 zoning district, you're basically getting 10 lots. This would need to be calculated by every applicant to determine what the total lot count on the property is. This is all subdivisions, minor, major, and it includes multifamily too. And this is really to bring the current zoning law in line with what's being done a lot in zoning laws, is to determine what the appropriate lot count or unit count is given the particular conditions of the property that's sought to be developed. Rather than an arbitrary 9,000 square foot, irrespective of what the site conditions are, or God help us, no density cap. There should be a density cap to determine what the appropriate lot count would be for that building site. So that's the proposal. Now, the one additional point to consider here is there's kind of, if you will, two columns under density. The right part provides you with the density factor, the area per lot or per unit. The other one is something called condition. You see that on the table? And the only condition here was within the R40 zoning district. And as I understand it, why that was placed in there, and this is something you raised a moment ago, Russ, is it's the R40 district where multifamily is allowed. And the consideration with multifamily usually is, in part, the ability to connect to public water and public sewer, or one or the other. Because when you can do that, you usually can thereby get additional units. Because you don't need the separations, you don't need on-site septic, you don't need on-site water supply. So what the proposal is when there is public water and public sewer available to the site, even though you're in an R40 zoning district, the density factor is 9,000 square foot per unit. Kind of reverted back to the 9,000. In considering if the site's got existing public water and public sewer to the building site. If that's the case and in your R40 zoning district, this proposal would be your density factor is the traditional 9,000 square feet. Then you may have a condition where public sewer is available, but public water is not, or vice versa. And there, the density factor jumps up to 25,000 square feet. But if you got a site where there is neither public water or public sewer available, then the calculation is 40,000 square feet per lot or per unit. And this is to give consideration to those availability of public utilities. Note that this is designed that if the applicant is proposing to extend that public water and public sewer at their cost, so a no-cost infrastructure extension for the town, then they get the additional density factor. That's kind of the incentive, if you will, for a developer to carry the public infrastructure to the project site for dedication to the town at no cost. There's additional density. You got to have the correct site to get, quite frankly, the number of units to then carry the project costs of extending public water and public sewer. It really, in the end, becomes a site condition driven density factor. What's the buildable area? What are the constrained lands? Where are the existing utilities? And does the overall project work economically based on the number of units I can get on the property? So that's one of the big changes that drove the proposed zoning revisions in the first instance was two-family and multifamily. It's a fairly significant change dealing with multifamily. Not too much change on two-family. They still be allowed in the same zoning districts. Still subject to special use permit review by this board. The biggest proposed amendment dealt with multifamily, what zoning districts they would be allowed, and the density factor to be brought to bear to consider how many units would be allowed. And the density factor applies not just to multifamily units, but to subdivision lots as well. It's a fairly significant proposed amendment to the zoning law, so it was a good idea to step through that. As I said, my experience has been that approach is not unusual in zoning laws to determine lot count or unit count. That's how I've read it and been involved in some of the proposed changes. The other factor, or not factor, one of the significant proposed changes is, and Chuck, you can weigh in on this one, was the elimination of the overlay districts. And this really was prompted by practical application of the zoning law and zoning map from 2017 to date. Why don't you go over what your department experienced?
Really?
Well, I mean, this was really the basis, the impetus for elimination of overlay districts. There was the agricultural overlay, the business light overlay. You're familiar with those overlay districts on the zoning map. These presented some challenges for the building department
Very much so.
in applying.
And in some cases gave, openings to solar as well.
Well, we've experienced that with the solar recently.
Yeah, I think it was the right intention, in my opinion, in 2017, when the agricultural overlay was discussed and put on the zoning map. It was my understanding that the intention was to identify those areas that were in state-certified agricultural districts. What happened in application was the state-certified agricultural districts, as shown on the county maps, they're fairly widespread throughout the town, and they continue to exist in areas that are currently zoned residential. Currently in areas where there are neighborhoods.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so what happened was people would say, well, I'm also in an agricultural overlay district. Can I do this? Which is allowable in the agricultural overlay district, which is not allowable in an R25 district. And as overlay works, the answer technically is yes, you can do it, but it's somewhat incompatible with like an R25 residential district. It was problematic. I now understand the concept of that particular overlay, but in practice, it just created some conflicts. So the concept here was eliminate the agricultural overlay. If you're in an ag district, under the state map, you're a state certified ag district, and you're actually engaged in a farm operation, you got protections under state law. Under this New York State Ag and Markets Law, you're a farm operation in a state certified ag district. Local zoning cannot unreasonably restrict your farm operation. So you have protection under state law. But if you're in a state certified ag district on a map, but you're not a farm operation, you don't get protection under the state ag and markets law. That's where our local zoning can come into play. And that's why the elimination of the overlay districts were considered. I won't get into it now, but there have been also some fairly significant changes to the definition of agricultural operations, farm operations, making that clear distinction between being in a state certified ag district with an existing farm operation and otherwise, because again, there are state law protections if you are an existing farm operation and you're in a state certified ag district, where local zoning cannot unreasonably restrict those farming operations. But if you don't meet those qualifications to get protection under the state ag and markets law, then there can be more restrictive zoning, and that's the way this has been set as well. So the ag overlay is proposed to be removed. The business light overlay going out Route 7 from 278, that was eliminated as an overlay district, and it's now proposed to be a distinct zoning district called highway commercial. And there are particular uses that would be allowable in highway commercial.
You still can use PDDs?
PDDs are still allowable, correct? Yeah. There were minor changes to the PDD
A
section.
little tweak, yeah.
Little tweaks,
Yeah.
but predominantly there's been changes. Some require 10 acres, some require 15 acres, but there's still the PDD proposal in front of the town board for larger projects. And in terms of the hamlet districts, my observation, for what it's worth, after the 2017 zoning map was adopted, is the hamlet concept, the mixed use, residential, smaller commercial, retail, walkable, very, very good in theory. It's a very good planning concept. Where they were located was, well, one of them was in Eagle Mills. One of them was basically at the corner of 278 and 2 in Tamarack. And these are state highways. And in terms of walkability, those particular locations, they're not really consistent having that little downtown hamlet feel when it's a state highway going through the middle. One could say Eagle Mills, maybe a little bit more. There's at least some sidewalks in the general location. At 278-2 in Tamarack, there's nothing. So did the concept of this mixed-use neighborhood, walkable feel fit in those locations? Probably not. So the proposal is to change that from a hamlet district to, what is it called, Chuck?
Local business district.
Local business district. That still allows some lighter commercial, different type of use, but it's really not designed to be the sidewalks and you leave your apartment and you walk down and get a cup of coffee and go to it just didn't seem to fit in those locations. And as a practical matter, there were some properties, particularly in Eagle Mills, where they had been placed in the hamlet district, which the uses allowable in the hamlet district really were not compatible with actually what was on the ground. And a lot of people wanted to buy properties and do certain uses, which seemed to make sense for that location, but they weren't allowable in the hamlet district. And so there were some things that folks wanted to do in town that kind of conceptually may have made sense, but didn't comply with the zoning law. And the option then would either be a use variance or ask the town board for a zone change. The problem for any applicant on a use variance is you've got to show that you can't get a reasonable economic return for any of the uses allowable in the zone. A very, very difficult standard to meet. There's a lot of uses that are allowable in hamlet. Probably not a successful use variance. And if you go in on a parcel basis for a zone change, it can be done, but sometimes a lot of people will come up with the spot zoning issue. So it was difficult. So the proposal here is to eliminate the hamlet, recast it as local business with different uses that are allowed. So those are, Russ and I talked, and those were probably the two big things to review tonight.
In the case of the local business district, or what the hamlet was in the Eagle Mills area, it extended all the way up Pinewoods Avenue to Grandview Ave. So that was quite a ways up.
Well, one of the perfect examples of what you were talking about was the old Pollock's property. They had
That's the
all these
one.
barns and all this type of stuff, and it was actually like a tractor supply type business there, the original Pollock's hardware farm equipment business. And there was a couple, Schindler had that property, and she came to us a couple times saying, I got a person that wants to put, park his trucks in there, so forth and so on. I can't do that, And there was a couple other people that came in using that property. It was unfortunate, but I mean,
We had that one tea company
Yeah,
that wanted to come in and use that. Yeah. And you could on part of the lot, but not on the other part of the lot.
right.
So again, the concept here is to let the board review the proposed changes, whatever comments you have on them. You can ultimately draft them up as review comments or recommendations and send them back to the town board for consideration.
What if we go through here and just, you agree with everything, just send them a letter and say, everything's fine?
We reviewed it and concur with the proposed amendments. That's an option, but
That's not really serving the purpose.
I was gonna say, Linda's already extended 3 pens worth of changes, so.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
Well, that was very enlightening, because I read all that stuff. And I couldn't combine it. like you
Yeah.
did. So that was good.
it took a little bit of time to kind of work through that. The multifamily housing was
That was a big thing.
a lot of discussion about where and then density, how to go about doing it.
And we had some discussions about, the moving forward with the definition of waiver, what we're allowing the waivers. We don't have to bring that up tonight, but basically the conversation went that maybe we're kind of extending this waiver thing a little bit beyond what it was intended to be. We've run into a couple of problems with some waivers, in particular the one now that we just issued for the parcel on the corner of Sharp and Spring Avenue. I'll make one step. Originally, when I was on the board, a waiver handled lot line adjustments for the most part, or creating parcels that were not building lots, but incorporated into another parcel. They also allowed for a homeowner to split off a lot for a child, relative or whatever. And basically that fell under the definition of it wasn't designed in order to make money on your property. It was designed to accommodate an estate or something like that. Since then, it has wandered away a little bit from its true purpose, and we probably should have some discussion about that, of how we want to
Reel it back in.
we want to, maybe I'm not saying we should, but it certainly has had some examples lately where we have allowed for a waiver. And it was to correct a problem in a major subdivision, for example, stuff like that. And I think we ought to have some discussion. We don't have to have it tonight, but do some thinking about that. We obviously have our own little thing about the 7 years. I don't think that's actually in the regulations, is it?
It is.
It is?
Yes.
But we should give that some thought, whether we want to revisit.
Is the waiver the discretion of the building department, or is it us, or building department with our input?
Ultimately, it's the planning board has the jurisdiction to determine. And while the name generally has been described as waiver of subdivision, it is still a type of subdivision. You just waive a lot of the regulatory requirements. You are potentially dividing a lot. So the waiver is not it's not a subdivision. You're waiving a number of the otherwise required regulations to review that. Because otherwise it'd be a minor, it'd be a building lot. So you're waiving some of that. What the regs say is that the planning board can waive those requirements. So if a waiver application is submitted to the building department, this board still has a jurisdiction to look and say, no, we don't think this is appropriate for a waiver. We think that all the subdivision requirements should apply.
And that's why we have new business. Brought out our new business, we decide if the waiver is legitimate, if it isn't. In the case of this one on
Ball Mountain, no, Ball Mountain.
Yeah, Ball Mountain Road. We, rejected the application. They can resubmit as a minor, which they're going to do. So give that some thought. We can discuss it along with this stuff. But I think we ought to give it some thought about reeling them in. Okay, if there's no other business or anything else to discuss, I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
One thing, if I could just add, maybe at the end of the July 7th agenda, still keep the discussion on zone law amendment,
Okay,
because that needs to keep
Yeah.
moving. And
I think we ought to keep moving forward on that, yeah. So, do your homework, next 3 weeks, it'll be back to fun. There'll be a quiz on the 21st.
Beach reading.
All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
The air conditioning working. Supposed to be 60 out there.